What's up, guys? This is Bradley alongside Zach and Dawson, and a special guest today, Henry. We are doing a Steelers Ravens preview, kind of the biggest game of the year so far, I guess you could say. Sunday at 1 p.m. Henry, thanks for being here, and how are you doing?
Thanks for having me on, guys. I'm doing well. I'm excited for the game. Would agree it's biggest game of the season so far for the Steelers. Feels like there hasn't been a Steelers Ravens game with the stakes being this high and both teams like having their starting quarterbacks available in a long time. Yeah, so that's pretty exciting. Definitely a bit nervous, but excited to talk about it with you guys.
Yeah, and by the way, for anyone, obviously no one knows, but Henry is my roommate. We've been friends for a while. I'm a Ravens fan. He's a Steelers fan, so we thought it would be cool to have him on for this and sort of conversate about this one coming up. Zach and Dawson, how you guys feeling? I mean, we were just live last night, but
I know it's honestly a great feeling to go back to back nights talking about just Ravens, and especially to kind of flip the script. Now we're talking about the Steelers and the Ravens. It's like I'm not sure if I would call it the biggest game of the season for us, but it sure does mean a lot, as in AFC North and everything. So I mean, dude,
mhm.
it is must watch football.
I am super stoked for this matchup. I am, however, very scared. I'm very nervous for this game. I have a weird feeling about it, but this is a huge game, man. I agree with Henry. This is probably the biggest matchup between the two teams, respectively, easily in the last few years. So the magnitude of this game bodes very well for the end result at the end of the season of what these teams do and basically who wins the division. And this is the first matchup between the two of the season. So, you know, winner of this one looks pretty good with their eyes set towards the next one. So it's going to be a big time game, man. And winner takes first place over through 11 weeks of football. So this is huge. This is all.
Yeah, exactly. And so it'll be Steelers are 7-2, Ravens are 7-3. It's gonna be at 1 p.m. on CBS. Ian Eagle and Charles Davis will be on the call as Jim Nantz and Romo will be calling the Bills Chiefs game at 4. Weather is going to be about 55 degrees cloudy. Betting wise, Ravens are favored by 3 in this one, over under 47.5. Getting to the injury report, obviously Kyle Hamilton had that really scary injury last Thursday. He actually was able to practice in a limited fashion today. You also have Lamar, who was limited today with that knee, kind of still nursing that. Otherwise, Ravens have been pretty healthy. Likely has gotten back into um, participating fully. Henry, in terms of the Steelers, is there any notable injury news on that side of things?
Yeah, probably the biggest thing is Jalen Warren popping up with a back injury today on the injury report. Did not practice. Um, he's been kind of banged up this year, and it sort of comes in the midst of the Steelers not picking up Najee's fifth-year option. Najee, he had 300-yard games in a row before last week. Did not have a 100-yard game. So that's sort of just swelling up a little controversy there. People in retrospect thinking, well, we should have picked up Najee's thing. It's like, all right, that's 3 games against like the New York teams. Like it's piped down a little bit. It's not a big thing. Corey Trice practiced today. He was a late round corner from Alabama in not this past year, but the year before his draft. A lot of potential, but injury concerns coming out of college, and he missed all of last year. He had an interception against the Broncos. Then got injured, I think, in the same game. So could be good to have him back. Our secondary is kind of sketchy. Dante Jackson was limited today. He's been injured the entire season. He's picking up like a new. He leaves every game like midway through with an injury. I don't really know what to expect there, but yeah, Nick Herbig, 2 straight full practices. He missed the last few games. That'll be big with Alex Highsmith being out for the next few weeks. And of course, having Preston Smith from the trade. So those two rotating on the other side of TJ Watt should be interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting to have Highsmith go out, but Herbig come back. Ravens can't really escape the 2 edge rushers on the Steelers side of the ball. So we'll see how that plays out. Zach or Dawson, you have anything to add on the injury reports?
I'm circling Kyle Hamilton. I think I'm hoping that he goes Sunday. We've had a history right now for Ravens and their injury reports where if they have a few limited, or if they're limited even all week, they end up being not playing in Sunday or the game next, and it happened with Marlon. I think it happened with one other guy I forgot, maybe like Michael Pierce this year. And if Hamilton also is limited tomorrow, it might not be a great sign to see if he plays Sunday.
Yeah, I think Kyle Hamilton's undoubtedly the most important piece here across the Ravens injury report. I will say it is November 14th, and I can't really complain with the list that we were given today. So the Ravens look pretty good health-wise, considering the circumstances, especially with a couple really tough games recently, really physical games, and another one on the horizon this week, probably the most physical all season. But Kyle Hamilton's obviously the outlier there. We need our guy. He's our star safety. He's the best player on defense, I would say, by a pretty decent margin. And, we need him out there. But however, it is, I believe, week 11. So, if he can't go and he's not 100%, I am not a fan of pushing him out there either way. Let him get healthy. Let him get back to 100% and let that guy go whenever he's healthy again. Don't push him. I would say we need him, but I'm more willing to take a gamble of us potentially winning a game without him rather than throwing him out there and injuring him further. So I think the injury report looks pretty clean. Looks like Isaiah Likely is going to be back, and a couple guys that have been in and out of there. I did see Arthur Millette today after practice was in a walking boot post practice. There has not been anything on that yet. It was a calf injury, they said. I really hope that's nothing serious, and it kind of sucks. Because obviously, this game was very important to him, and he probably circled this one more than any of them on the calendar this season. He wants to go back to Pittsburgh, and he's been kind of battling some injuries to fight the begin the season. I'm sorry, and hopefully nothing serious there. Hopefully Arthur Millette's okay. He's a pretty good player we have there in the secondary, and kind of sucks when you're losing players and you're by far weakest position, and I would say as far as how they're playing. So I'm super hyped for this game, and Ravens look like they're going to go into it pretty healthy, considering the circumstances. Like I said, however, they might be without one of their best playmakers in Kyle Hamilton.
Yeah, for sure. It'll be. I mean, we saw the Ravens defense without Hamilton against the Bengals for a little bit. It didn't get that much worse because they were already playing very, very bad. But it'll be interesting to see how they perform in a full game without him if he can't go. In terms of matchup history against the Steelers, obviously there's a lot of it with this rivalry sort of being a thing since the late 90s. Steelers lead the all-time series 35-25, actually, so 10 more wins for them. In terms of Lamar versus the Steelers, he's just 1-3. It's kind of funny how Lamar's like 10-1 against the Bengals. He played 11 games against the Bengals. He's only played 4 against the Steelers. But yeah, 1-3 still, nonetheless. And last 8 games against the Steelers are 7-1. Henry, sort of what do you think about the Steelers having this much success over the last 4 years, especially against the Ravens?
I mean, a lot of it you can chalk up to the Tyler Huntley experience. With the one win being with Anthony Brown against did Kenny Pickett start the game and then Mitch Trubisky?
I think so. Yeah,
finish the game if you wanted to call that what he was doing. I don't know. You look at the film from last game and all the drops. You'd think like unlikely to happen again, but you saw what happened against the Browns a few weeks ago where the drops did pop up. I don't know. It's sort of a interesting Mike Tomlin thing. Like there's always a handful of games that the Steelers should not be losing, like to the Colts, Joe Flacco, but then you have games that he mysteriously pulls out. The record in the last 8 games makes me that does not impact my confidence level at all. Heading into this one, if anything, I think Lamar is especially due to have a big game because it's not only not getting the wins, but it's not he's not having 300-yard passing games. I don't think he has a rushing touchdown against the Steelers. He's having a lot of turnovers. If you look at the game last year where you had a bunch of drops, but then you had fourth quarter end zone interception, then give up a touchdown, sack, fumble on the next drive. So that's not like sort of characteristic of Lamar in terms of closing out a game well. So I don't know. I really think Lamar and the Ravens are due, but there's certainly something there, and I think that's something the Steelers locker room, the veterans, Cam Hayward, Minka, Mike Tomlin, can feed off of that and bring that juice to the matchup.
It's so It's so weird to think about how dominant the Steelers have been over the Ravens, really the last 4 or 5 years. I mean, 7-1 record against them is just that's so lopsided in one way. It's hard to think about because I'm not going to have any bias here when I say this, but it's like every single year, if those teams are like neck and neck, skill wise, talent wise, record wise, I mean, the Steelers obviously have so much success under Mike Tomlin. They've never had a losing season, and it doesn't look like they're going to have one this season as well. And it's just crazy because, the Ravens, I believe, have been favored in a lot of these games that they've lost over the last, 4 years. When they're 7-1, against Baltimore, I think the Ravens have been favored in a lot of these games, and they're favored once again this week. So it's weird to think about. It's just very odd because you have Lamar Jackson, of course, who has played very few games against them, and there's been a lot of injuries and weird stuff that has happened to the lineups, given who's actually playing on the day we play the Steelers. But it's weird because I feel like kind of Henry went over it with Mike Tomlin and all the veterans there. They have like this little recipe for success. And Lamar Jackson, when it comes to playing the Steelers, and I would say the Ravens as a whole too, they just look like a completely flat team. Like there's just something there that makes them get thrown off, and they don't even look anything like the team that they are. It's crazy. Like obviously we know what we've seen from Lamar and the Ravens these last 5, 6 weeks. You watch this week, they're going to look completely different. It could be in a good way or it could be a bad way. They're going to look completely different. And then next week, they'll look like the same team again. There's going to be something that the Steelers do where the Ravens this week just look like a completely different team. And I don't know if that forces them to beat Pittsburgh in a one-dimensional way. I don't know if that, there's something there. And they have a recipe for success clearly against Baltimore because it's has not worked in Baltimore's favor at all recently. And it's kind of sad. It kind of sucks for us, especially. Not really for you, Henry, but it kind of sucks. But I do agree. Lamar Jackson and the Ravens as a whole are very, very due for a big game against Pittsburgh. It's been long overdue. And, there hasn't been a game with Lamar in his career where he's went out against the Steelers and has made a statement or made an impact. He's done it against the Browns and Bengals very, very often, and Pittsburgh it just hasn't happened yet. So hopefully this is the week that they're due, and hopefully this is the week that they come out and actually do it. That would be really nice. But there's a weird recipe there that Pittsburgh has, and it always makes the Ravens looks weird. They're just like a flat team when they play Pittsburgh, and I really don't understand why.
Perfectly said.
Yeah, it's a good point you bring up, and I didn't really think about it that way, but it does just always seem like from the jump, the Ravens are just not who they normally are emotionally playing the Steelers. And I feel like you see that against the Chiefs a little bit as well in these past couple of years. So it's those kind of two teams. I've seen them talking about it on, First Take and all those shows where Lamar's really struggled against the Chiefs and the Steelers. And there's the same vibe going into those games first quarter. Like it does feel flat at the beginning of those games. At least I feel like it does. Getting into the offseason moves for the Steelers, this is where it gets really interesting. They obviously signed Justin Fields, and that kind of felt like the signing, and he was going to be their quarterback. Or no, did they sign Russ first? They signed Russ first. And I feel like,
was it a trade?
Yeah. So they had Russ, and then they signed Fields, and then you're like, oh, wait, this is sort of confusing here. They also bring in Patrick Queen, who shocked every Ravens fan, and obviously Deshaun Elliott as well, who came over from Miami. He's having a really, really good year for them. I guess, Henry, my first question would be to you is when Tomlin went from Fields to Russ, how did you feel about it, and how has it sort of changed the context of the team over the past couple of weeks?
Yeah. Wasn't a huge fan of the decision initially. Fields had the team playing – he was playing okay. Offense is doing okay. We're coming off a 30-point offensive point total against the Raiders the week before, but we had the interception, run back, or like block punt or something. The numbers weren't as cranked out as they kind of looked on paper. And with Russ, it was like, okay, his first few drives against the Jets, it was like, well, I wish our quarterback was taller, had maybe a little bit stronger of an arm, and could run a little faster because every time it was like bouncing at the receiver's feet. He can't get outside the pocket. The offensive line's collapsing. But he's really gotten it under control, and there's a few things that pop out. One is the touch on his passes and giving receivers a chance to make a play. The moon ball is famous with Russ, but it's really apparent with guys like George Pickens who can come you put the ball in their vicinity, give them a real chance. he's going to come out with it like a 90-10 ball. Mike Williams, newly added, we saw his game-winning catch against Washington. Again, giving him a chance to make a play. But it helps elevate guys like Freiermuth, gives guys like Van Jefferson maybe a little bit more of a chance to make a play there. The other thing is the impact of play action. So Justin Fields, surprisingly, like really was not successful with play action. With Russell Wilson, I think in 2 games, he had the same amount of play action yards that Justin Fields had during his time starting, which was like 6 games. And they're running play action sort of at a similar rate. So Russ just really has that under control. And with the team the Steelers want to be, they really want to be utilizing Najee, and Arthur Smith likes play action, and that really is going to open up your offense a little more, hopefully establish a little more rhythm. That's been the big thing there. And then like the veteran leadership, the confidence. It'll be interesting to see. I mean, you're 3-0, so I'm sure it's easy to be a leader in that scenario and see all the social media posts and everything's like happy-go-lucky in Pittsburgh. So you haven't really faced that big loss, that adversity. Like Russ hasn't put up a stinker yet. He hasn't cost the game with like a fumble or an interception or something. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. But that veteran leadership seems like it's definitely having an impact on the offense.
For me, thinking about like the Steelers and those offseason moves, like obviously we were stupid surprised at Patrick Queen. Henry, you might have been. I have no idea if you were kind of like, oh, they're going to go after a linebacker, or, you know, them needing quarterback play. What was more surprising? The 2 quarterbacks, or one of those quarterbacks being signed, or Patrick Queen turning from Raven to Steeler?
Quarterback, I don't think wasn't as surprising. I think that link to Justin Fields had kind of been had been really hyped up, had been talked about before the move was made. Russell Wilson was pretty surprising, but when you see the logistics of it and you're like, oh, you're barely paying your quarterback any money. You have 2 quarterbacks. And going from the fact we'd been running a 2 quarterback system with Kenny Pickett and Mitch Trubisky the last 2 years, it's like, I'll take it any day.
Yeah.
Queen was surprising. The Steelers have really had a void at that linebacker spot since Shazier got injured. And they brought in a few guys to try and replace that middle of the field area, whether it's just like your more traditional linebacker or sort of like a safety linebacker hybrid, and just has not worked out at all. I think Patrick Queen was the largest free agent signing that the Steelers ever had. They don't typically dish out a lot of money to free agents, and seeing sort of what the talk was from Ravens fans, from people that like, oh, well, Roquan comes along and all of a sudden it was like, oh, no way, we just paid this dude a bunch of money. So there's a little bit of skepticism, but he's coming off a tremendous year. Mike Tomlin's really high on him. That really matters for the team. And in terms of how he's doing now, he's coming off his best game of the season so far. He got off to a pretty rocky start where it was looking like, oh, he's missing Queen. He's sort of out on skates in there. He's not getting downhill. He's a little late. He's not quite in there in coverage. He's missing tackles. But against Washington, he had a few tackles for loss where he's getting skinny between the guards and getting downhill into the backfield, making plays on screens. He was spying Jaden Daniels, who had his lowest rushing total of the season, and had a great play on like a read option following Daniels to the sideline. So I'm encouraged by that. I'm hoping this is going to be a continuing trend, but you don't really know which way this sort of emotional game is going to lead for him.
Yeah, and speaking of Queen being on the Steelers and Deontay Johnson now being on the Ravens and Millette being on the Ravens, it does feel like there's more impact to this game than normal, combined with the fact that, you know, Henry and I have talked about this over the years of being friends, where this division is so much more fun when the Steelers and the Ravens are both good. And it feels like a rivalry. So, Dawson, I'll kick this to you first. Like, do you feel like there might be more, I don't know, tension going on in this one with Elliott and Queen being on the Steelers and Johnson and Millette being on the Ravens, and also with the fact both teams are, you know, top echelon of the AFC?
I definitely agree. I definitely think there is way, way, way more anticipation for this specific matchup on Sunday that we're going to witness. As far as the Ravens Steelers games over the last I would say probably 4 or 5 years. I mean, seriously, the last I think like 8 matchups, there has not been this much hype and this much on the line as far as what there is this Sunday. You got Arthur Millette, like you just said, you got Arthur Millette and Deontay Johnson over in Baltimore. Granted, they're not superstar players, but however, they both had a substantial amount of years in Pittsburgh with a lot of success, and vice versa. Patrick Queen and Deshaun Elliott are now in Pittsburgh, and they kind of flipped the script. And now I'm sure, obviously, they know what this game means to them. And I'm sure their teammates know. And both these teams are going to play literally until their helmets fall off. It's going to be a fantastic game. And, you got both teams coming into this matchup respectively pretty healthy, given it's week 11 in the NFL. And they both got their quarterbacks on the field right now who are playing really good ball. Russell Wilson's playing really good football since he came up. Like Henry said, he kind of had a little bit of a rocky start. Everyone was kind of unsure with Mike Tomlin's decision to kind of go towards Russ rather than moving on to Fields, who I believe had the Steelers like a 3-1, 4-1 record to start the season. And both teams are playing really good football. They're 7-2 and 7-3 respectively on top of the AFC North. Winner takes over first after this week, man, and this game means the world to both of these teams. I think they know. I don't want to say this in a weird way, but I feel like this game is more important for the Ravens than Pittsburgh because at the end of the day, if Pittsburgh loses, they're still right there. I mean, either team's still right there, but Baltimore has to get this monkey off their back with how they've been playing against Pittsburgh, and you cannot drop another one against Pittsburgh, man. I mean, realistically, the Ravens need to like sweep Pittsburgh this year, or it's just going to be bad. It's going to be an immediate like, okay, we just can't beat Pittsburgh. It's just it's not a game that we can win, and there's gonna be a lot of hope that's just lost with those matchups, and the Ravens have to get it done, man. And like we said earlier in this pod, that Kansas City and Pittsburgh are probably the two teams right now in the NFL, if you had to pinpoint two, that obviously give the Ravens the most trouble. And they see Pittsburgh twice a season, and there's no way can you get swept by Pittsburgh this season again. So the Ravens got to make a move, man. They really got to jump out at Pittsburgh, kind of show them what they're here and what they're here to do, and or why they're here and what they're here to do. And the Ravens just got to win this game, man. Like this is very important. And I know that this is in Pittsburgh, so a lot of the times, before Pittsburgh took over as this dominant, team in this matchup the last few years, it was kind of always an even split, as are the other divisional games usually. But it would be really nice for Baltimore to go into Pittsburgh this Sunday and get a win, and hopefully come back at home later in the season against Pittsburgh and get another win, and kind of get that troubled past in the history and move on and say, okay, we got this swept and now we can move on and restart this rivalry. So I think the anticipation is through the roof for this game. I think obviously we can say this every week about every game, but seriously, I think this game is absolutely huge. And the only game that I can realistically put on par with this one this season, as far as, the meaning to this game and for the Ravens specifically, I would say probably the Buffalo Bills game. The Kansas City game, yeah, but that was week 1, man. Like, teams are not really established yet. It's the first week of football. Teams are all over the place. But that Buffalo game, man, that was a huge game for Baltimore. And obviously, they came out and delivered. And hopefully, we could see a similar result this Sunday against Pittsburgh. That would be awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Henry, what's your take? Or sorry,
no, you're
Henry, what's
fine.
your take on the players? With being on separate teams, sort of the traitors as they're calling each other on the podcast with Marlon and.
I think it's a really fun new wrinkle to add to the rivalry, and it's so cool that it comes in this game where we've already established the stakes are so much higher than they've been in a long time because back in late 2000s, early 2010s, where I'm more thinking about this from a Steelers fan perspective, but you had this super intense, it was always, you had a Sunday night game, these really physical montages, just crazy plays, Ben with a broken nose, Terrell Suggs jumping all over people. There's just big hits on from both sides, but you didn't have this James Harrison used to be in the Ravens, although maybe he was on the practice squad or something.
Yeah.
But you didn't have something like this. So I think it's so cool for Harbaugh and Tomlin, who have just been pillars of this rivalry, to still be able to have this new wrinkle. And I don't know. I think it's really exciting. I think with Queen, especially, the Ravens apparently not having offered him a contract, him not having talked to EDC or Harbaugh, that's interesting. Elliott, I don't know how much that plays into it, but I've been seeing that clip of him tackling Derrick Henry from a few years ago or whatever, and that gave me a little confidence. He's having a great season. But yeah, I think it's only just builds the stakes, makes it more fun, and it's cool for a rivalry that's had the same coaches and the same sort of physicality to be getting a new wrinkle at this time.
I want to add something before you move on, Brad.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like this game means a lot. I think what they play week 18. They play late again, right?
It's like the Saturday before Christmas.
17.
Okay. Yeah. So week 17. That game could mean a lot for the division. If these teams stay winning, maybe they drop a few, both teams. Possible like wild card type matchup. Like there's a lot happening with these games that's going to be apparent in the future, but it's a lot of pressure that we don't even see yet. Like that could still unfold later on.
Yeah, the outcome of this game is undoubtedly going to have huge implications down the road as far as the divisional standings and probably the AFC seeding standings, of course, as well. All I'll say, though, before we move on is I really hope that we at least once in this game get to see Derrick Henry and Patrick Queen in the open field together, one-on-one. Henry, I wish you luck in that instance. I just hope Derrick Henry runs through Patrick Queen at least once this game, because I'm a huge Patrick Queen fan. I've always loved the guy, and I still do, a little bit less than I usually did, but I still love the guy. But I don't like the way he handled the situation leaving Baltimore necessarily. He kind of has been on a tear ever since, and he still has, even until 24 hours ago. So I hope at least once in this game we get to see Derrick Henry run through Patrick Queen, if not a one-on-one opportunity, and it'd be awesome. Either way, it would be incredible, and I would hate to see Patrick Queen level Derrick Henry, of course, if that's even possible. But like, you got to admit that'd be pretty crazy. Like it'd be awesome, but it would kind of suck too, though.
Yeah, it'll definitely be interesting to see if we can get a one-on-one, maybe like a Henry down the sideline stiff arm with Queen chasing him or Elliott chasing him, and sort of see what happens in that situation. To get more into the actual game, we'll start with Ravens offense versus Steelers defense. Zach, you can take it away. Here.
Yes, please. I love doing these stats, Henry. This is what we kind of look at whenever we do these previews, just on both sides of the ball. First, Brad said it, Ravens offense versus the Steelers defense. Steelers defense is 19th in passing, which I found pretty surprising. I like their corners a lot, and I was surprised that it's honestly that far back. They're 4th in rushing defense. They're one of 4 teams, including Baltimore, allowing under 100 yards per game rushing. That's a pretty awesome stat. They're tied for 20th in sacks with 22. Another surprising thing, I know the D-line's been banged up for them, but I was like, shoot, that seems pretty low for them as well than usual. And Steelers are 2nd in points per game allowed with 16.2. Ravens are 1st with 31.8. It's like the immovable object or whatever it is. Like it's like something's got to break, right? It just feels like something would. And also for Ravens offensive stat, the last 6 games, the Ravens have had a receiver over 100 yards. One of those being Tylan Wallace, but Zay also doing his thing. That's a pretty awesome stat. Any stat really pointing out to either of you guys?
I mean, the points per game is pretty big. That'll be something to watch. The Steelers defense really is a bend don't break style. I think their red zone defense is one of the best in the league, whether it's forcing turnovers or having big sacks to force a field goal. Special teams has been big for the Steelers. But with Lamar Jackson or whatever, I mean, this is not first game Kirk Cousins. This isn't Daniel Jones. This isn't the Raiders. You know, like this is a different beast, and it's I don't know how much you can take away from that, but you got Derrick Henry. You know, I think it was an interesting test with Jaden Daniels in Washington last week.
Mm-hmm.
People saying, well, the Steelers are like prepared. They're putting their Lamar strategy out there. Well, it's like, all right, you got like bruised ribs, Jaden Daniels, and Austin Eckler. Like, this is not Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry. It's going to be it's going to be a bit of a different scenario. And having Highsmith out is going to hurt a little bit. And the passing defense, the secondary. I'm just on paper, I don't see a ton of success for the Steelers there.
Well, the other underlying issue too is that this is not the matchup as us Ravens fans are fearing as far as this game. Obviously Pittsburgh's defense is good. I don't agree with, I believe his name was Spencer Hayden. He just said in the chat a couple minutes ago that the Ravens have not seen a good defense yet. I think that is false. We've played several good defenses, and Denver is a very good defense.
Yeah,
The
Denver was the
Cowboys,
number one defense in the NFL. The Ravens scored 41
Denver
points.
is a very good defense. Washington's defense is not bad. The Bills'
Chiefs.
defense is really good. The Browns' defense is pretty good. The Cowboys were healthy when we played them, so it's not our fault for who we play. You play who you play. The NFL gives you a team. You can't pick who you play defensively, on defense wise. So you just got to do your job. And obviously, they have throughout this point. The Ravens' offense is an absolute juggernaut with a whole head of steam. But this is not the matchup that we fear in this matchup for Ravens fans. We're not scared of watching the Ravens offense find success. We're scared of seeing the Ravens defense try to find any breath of fresh air or life grasping onto the final straws. We're just, I'm going to flip the script here. Obviously, we can move on to the defense here. It's the biggest issue, by far for the Ravens to this point. And the Steelers offense, man, has been no joke the last few weeks, and they're finding a lot of success, specifically outside the numbers. Obviously, Henry mentioned, everyone knows the infamous moon ball from Russell Wilson that seems to find a way to work every single game, and it's unbelievable. And, with the Ravens having a very problematic cornerback on the outside in Brandon Stevens, who will probably be over George Pickens quite a bit this Sunday, which is going to be very scary to watch. So it's going to be an interesting matchup. And I think this is going to be, I don't want to say I'm not confidently saying it's going to be a high scoring game, but I do think this is a game where if a team scores, the other team's going to go down and score again. I think it's going to be tit for tat. And in the end, it's going to be a close game like it always is with Pittsburgh and Baltimore games. They're always down to the last minute every single time, man. Makes no sense. Even if one team is significantly better, it doesn't matter. No holds barred in these matchups, and these matchups are always super close.
There's another comment from Spencer mentioning Lamar being historically bad against the Steelers. And obviously, anyone who has watched the Ravens can vouch for. There's definitely truth to it, right? But what I will say, and what I think Zach and Dawson and even Henry will agree with, is that game last year that Lamar played in, and the only game that Lamar's played with Todd Monken against the Steelers, I mean, there was 7, 8, 9 drops. I think there was 2 or 3 in the end zone, and they were all on different possessions where the Ravens didn't score. Again, he did throw a pick on the fade ball to Odell. He did get strip sacked again. So there are still those turnovers. And we talked about this last night. Lamar has 2 picks on the year, and that's it. And so it'll be interesting to see if he can continue with that, really not turning the ball over at all, if he'll be able to continue to do that on Sunday.
Yeah, I think talking about middle of the field for really both sides of the ball, with the Steelers having Patrick Queen in there sort of being the X factor on defense. Like you talk about what's the matchup going to be with Derrick Henry in the open field, but if he's going to be spying on Lamar Jackson, that feels like almost the bigger matchup to me is what those interactions look like. Someone who's really had a quiet year statistically has been Minkah Fitzpatrick. And he's, I think NFL fans, Steelers fans are accustomed to big splash plays from him, but he's gone almost like 20-something games without having forcing a turnover or something like that. The Steelers have him sort of in the true meaning of a safety role. He's the lid on the defense. He's preventing the big plays. He's letting everyone else be in their correct spots and do the best thing, but he's not forcing the turnovers. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's something that in a huge rivalry game like this, maybe this is, I mean, it would undoubtedly be a great time to get some turnovers going. But, the Steelers secondary is Joey Porter Jr. coming off his worst game of his career. Terry McLaurin had his way with him. He's either getting snagged on or snagging on the other guy's jersey and drawing a lot of holding penalties. And he's built up a reputation for himself. There's no one no one to blame but him, I'm afraid. And now the refs
Wow.
are looking for it, and they're getting ticky-tacky. And I mentioned Dante Jackson injured. He had some splash plays to start the year, and since then he has not looked super good. It seems like he's always just 10 yards back on someone, and they're getting in front of him, or I don't know. Not looking super great. Steelers have Cam Sutton, who was on the Steelers for a while, went to the Lions. Is probably showing more aggression off the field than he has been showing on the field so far in recent years, and did not look good against Washington. So the secondary, I just wonder with Zay Flowers, Bateman, Deontay Johnson, like these are all receivers that are creating a ton of separation, that are really shifty. That makes me nervous. And yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, definitely good points there. And my last thing on this side of the ball is it will be interesting to see what the Steelers do on the defensive side of the ball. When every team the Ravens have played for this year, it feels like they either try to stop Derrick Henry, like that's their number one goal, or they just say, we're not going to let Lamar throw the ball and Derrick Henry runs for 200, or they kind of go with this balanced approach and then Derrick Henry rushes for 180 and Lamar throws for 300. It'll be interesting to see what the Steelers' sort of strategy is in that sense. I don't know.
Last week against Ravens Light, they at least in run defense, they really targeted Jaden Daniels. They said, we're not letting you run the ball. We're going to get a hit on you. You're going to be handing it off. Washington was without Brian Robinson.
Yeah.
So, when it's Jeremy McNichols, Austin Eckler, Chris Rodriguez, that's not as big of a threat. When it's Derrick Henry, Keaton Mitchell,
yeah,
you don't know how well that's going to work. But Cam Hayward's having a tremendous season. The Steelers are really sound in their rush lanes, not letting Daniels escape, and I think that's probably a key to success that the Steelers have had over the last 4 years is really being sound in those rush lanes, because they haven't had a Shazier, they haven't had an all-pro middle linebacker to be a spy on Lamar, so it's really up to the trenches, TJ Watt, Hayward, to get that going.
Zach, what you got for us on the other side of the ball in this one?
For the Steelers offense versus the Ravens defense, we got to talk about Mr. Russell Wilson and his impact for the Steelers. 245 yards per game, 6 touchdowns and 1 interception on the year. Freaking awesome stats in 3 games played, right? 26 points per game with Justin Fields. They're up to 30.3 points per game with Russell Wilson. They have a 41.8% third down conversion. That would be top 10 in the NFL. We also played the Bengals. We talked about last week, third down conversion percentage. They were one of the best in the league at home. Now, we're playing another divisional opponent at home. We could see, big third down plays made. Whenever I looked at their totals and everything, it felt like nothing was even past 50% in any of those games. I think the Ravens tend to have some of those kind of weeks, but this would be a team where if we can get a few of those third down stops, that'd be a big deal. This is probably the biggest stat to me. I can't believe this. Ravens are tied for 4th in the NFL. It's tied with one team. So top 5. Tied for 4th in sacks with 31 sacks this year. 31 sacks. And we were the ones really baby crying about a pass rusher needing one. And sure, I would take one still. But I think there's some different proof in the pudding that we weren't seeing. And maybe DaCosta was like, nah, y'all are tripping. Let's see what these boys can do. What in the world? I can't believe that stat. 4th?
It's weird. They were good in September. Kyle Van Noy, Owe, Ojabo even, getting after the quarterback. There was this dry spell where we saw, especially in the Broncos game, we were all in disbelief at how much time Bo Nix had to throw. I will say, last week against the Bengals, pass rush looked great. And it was just fully the secondary that had an issue. But I really think those sack numbers are still kind of carrying in the statistic department from September. And the pass rush really hasn't been good the past couple weeks besides Thursday. Henry
I'm gonna.
going. Yeah.
Before you say anything, Brad, I'm gonna kind of rebut it. I feel like even with all these weeks, that the beginning seemed so dominant that it was the few kind of, I wouldn't say star players, but our stars for the defense. It was kind of those guys taking over, and then the last few weeks, sure, I would say it's kind of carried, but like the last few weeks has been everyone else kind of stepping up. It's just not been
BK 3 last week.
right, and freaking it's been a few guys just randomly pitching in a few sacks.
Yeah.
Corners, linebackers getting subbed in. Like it's been talented stuff. It's honestly a good sign for the pass rush. It takes, Beaks to go off for give us a few, be the game record we know you can be. And I saw a lot versus the Bengals where they move him around, putting him in the edge. I mean, that's terrifying. And then putting him in the middle as well.
That was
really mixing it up. I think you definitely see more of that versus the Steelers. I don't know how their offensive line is stacking up right now, but maybe throw him on a guy that's been struggling a little bit and see what happens.
Yeah, Henry, what's your overall confidence level in the Steelers being able to consistently move the ball on this number 32 passing defense in the NFL?
Yeah, I mean, if we want to talk about the offensive line, the Steelers have had a lot of injuries there. If you look at the season as a whole, started with our starting center, Nate Herbig, being on IR before the season even started, thrusting, I think second-round pick, Zach Frazier from West Virginia, to be our starting center. He's been amazing, though. He's actually, I think, just coming back from injury this week. So we had another rookie, I think, playing center. He was doing solid. We had our first-round pick, Troy Fatanu, out at right tackle. He got injured season-ending injury a few games into the season, putting Broderick Jones, who was our first-round pick a few years ago. He started the season terribly. It was every time we had a big play, it was coming back like a holding penalty. But he had his best game as a pro, or best game this season last week. Didn't give up any pressures, no hurries, really sound game against Washington. And then we had one of our starting guards, James Daniels. He's on IR. This thrust a mid-round pick, Mason McCormick, rookie, into guard. But he's panned out well. Him and Frazier, they've done about as well as you could ask for him. But it makes me nervous. I don't know. I think when you watch the Steelers, you see like if they're picking up 4 yards on first down, if they're picking up chunk plays on first down, drive has a good success rate. But if they get stuffed on first down, it's like, all right, they're punting. A holding penalty on first down, yeah, just throw the drive away. And in division games like this, where you're not utilizing the middle of the field that much, and you're not super resistant to penalties in the middle of drives, and you're really working the sidelines a lot, I don't know how consistent you can plan on that being. And then going a little more into that protection, we saw Jaylen Warren pop up on the injury report with a back injury. He is one of the elite pass protectors as a running back. He's always putting his body on the line to pick up these blitzers. Not having him is a huge blow. We have Cordero Patterson as our RB3, and he's got some weight to him that helps him in pass pro, but not the greatest guy you're hoping to have back there. So I think that could be a problem, but George Pickens, he's been great. Hopefully getting Freiermuth involved over the middle, and testing out and see what Roquan Smith can do. I know Ravens fans have not been too complimentary of Roquan to start the year, but the Steelers don't use the middle of the field a ton, and maybe that's not that you're necessarily hiding Roquan Smith in the middle of the field, but maybe some of those issues you've seen before won't be popping up as much.
That's what scares me too, because the Pittsburgh offense absolutely thrives outside the numbers, and the Ravens defense as a whole, of course, is a very poor unit, this season. But on the outside of the numbers thing, they haven't been too great against it as far as, what they usually do season by season, just being a pure dominant defense overall, amongst the whole league. But this season, man, The Pittsburgh offense absolutely thrives outside the numbers. George Pickens is a phenomenal wide receiver. I don't care what anyone says. He's a great contested guy. Outside the numbers, he thrives, and he's a dog. He's a very good wide receiver, and it's going to be unfortunate if we see Brandon Stevens kind of shadowing over him a lot this Sunday, because Brandon Stevens has been very bad this season, especially after a really good season last year that he had, which he kind of broke out in Baltimore, and everyone, we kind of all were super excited with the future of him, especially transitioning over from safety to cornerback. And he had a really good season last year. And unfortunately, this season, I don't know what happened. He kind of fell off the cliff, and he's been exposed, I feel like, on a weekly basis. And George Pickens is next in line as another wide receiver who can give him a lot of trouble. So hopefully the Ravens are smart about this, and hopefully they don't make the mistake and kind of let Nate Wiggins and hopefully Marlon Humphrey over top of Pickens more so than Brandon Stevens, because that is a matchup I just don't want to see until Brandon Stevens gives us any hope as far as him kind of finding his track record again, I should say. And this is the most scariest matchup of all, in this game is our defense trying to find life, because they've been really bad. And there's not much to say about it, man. I just, I can sit here and talk about how bad the defense has been all day, but at the end of the day, there's not one specific player, not one specific positional group. There's not a coach I can blame. Like, it's just the whole unit is playing very poor, and the blame goes all across the board. So I just hope this is a game where the Ravens defense can, get pressure like they did last week against Cincinnati, and kind of hopefully maybe cause Russ to kind of make his first mistake, I would say, in Pittsburgh. Kind of Henry was kind of talking about it, how Russell Wilson hasn't really had that game yet, or that moment where it's like, oh my God, like, here we go. Like the pick, the fumble, bad decision. Like, maybe this is a game where the Ravens defense can throw something at him that he hasn't seen in a while, and maybe he can make a mistake, and the Ravens can kind of capitalize and take advantage of that. But who knows, man? Until this Ravens defense shows us, on a consistent game-to-game basis that they have life again and they can be a good unit in the NFL, I don't really have any hope as far as them shutting down an offense, especially one who's playing very hot right now and sitting with a 7-2 record with a very good wide receiver.
An interesting thing to watch is going to be George Pickens' ball security. He had a really costly fumble when we played the Colts, where he has just this knack. He gets on the sideline and like he just holds the ball. Like, it's not even like LaShawn McCoy. Like, it's like full extension, just like waving the ball around while he's jumping around. And he fumbled right at like inside the 10 or something. Had already gotten like a first down, careless. He had one of those moments again last week where you may have seen the clip, just like, well, what is he doing? He's like hurdling like into someone, like something random, but he's holding he's stiff arm and holding the ball out all on one side. And that's just like, it seems like a classic Ravens. I know secondary is not what we're complimenting today, but like as a Steelers fan, it seems like a classic Ravens secondary move.
Absolutely.
to be forcing those fumbles. I saw
At
the
least
highlight
Marlon.
of the flashbacks to Juju in overtime. I saw the clip of Vance McDonald fumbling on Sunday Night Football as he's going to the ground. So these are things like that where they come up in the game. Oh, you got to put the ball away, but it's like, it's Pickens. He's phenomenal. He's the reason we're having as much success as we are this season. But these little things that I have not seen them been cleaned up so far this year, and it makes you wonder that you got a Marlon that has a knack for those turnovers. If maybe he's getting beat, but he knows like he's going to be holding the ball around trying to reach for this random extra yard on the 30-yard catch. I'm going to go knock it out. And then to go along with that is like the AFC North rivalry. Like, Pickens is a feisty guy. I know Nate Wiggins has some juice to him. Marlon's been in these games. That's a component of it too. We talk about like, Russ hasn't had that moment of having a turnover, but like in these big games, if Pickens fumbles, like, who's picking him up? Like, if they're getting in his face, like, all that same sort of thing piles up, and that's not something necessarily you're gonna see in like a box score or like a stat sheet before the game. So I think that'll be interesting to watch out for.
Do you want to say anything, Dawson? Or
No.
Okay. Yeah, and we touched on it a little bit about the Ravens defense really struggling over the middle. And I was talking about it last night when we were live with Simpson, who gets a complete pass. I don't blame him at all for being a rookie. He's not a rookie, but we're calling him a rookie linebacker. That's besides quarterback, inside linebacker might be the hardest position in the NFL to play as a young guy. Just like learning everything. You got to know what the D-line's doing. You got to know what the edge rushers are doing. You got to know what the safeties are doing behind you. It's tough. So he's been struggling with hook zones and all that type of stuff. And then Roquan has just not been – it's being blown out of proportion a little bit, but he's not the guy that he was last year. And that's just what we've seen. Queen is definitely – I would say was our best coverage linebacker last year. So losing him has hurt. And it is interesting. You see the charts on Twitter that are posted from NFL's Next Gen Stats and stuff. And literally in between the hashes, not even in between the hashes, in between the numbers, Russ barely throws the ball over the middle of the field. And that's really where the Ravens have struggled. Yes, Brandon Stevens has struggled a bit on the outside, but every time you see a big play, you see Chase wide open down the middle. You see Chase catching an in route 80-yard touchdown. I mean, it's really like I'd say 75% of the Ravens' issues have been over the middle, and Russell Wilson really doesn't attack that.
Yeah, I mean that's a great point. I think what you could see is like a little bounce back for the inside linebackers if their job is mostly trying to cover over like basic stuff. I think the Steelers might, get some crosser, trying to get some guys in motion because they're trying to create plays like the Bengals did. And I think you just have to wrap them up. I don't think that it's no disrespect to them. I don't feel like any of the Steelers receivers are kind of like specialty is with yards after catch or making the big play after the grab. I think I've seen dominance whenever they get the jump balls and everything, but I haven't seen the like Jamar Chase level, obviously not Jamar Chase, but just a few of those guys that we've seen this year where they get a 10-yard pass and create it into, 30, 40. I just don't see that with them. Maybe Pickens has that ability, but I think that's a possible bounce back thing. And like Henry mentioned with the fumbles, the Ravens also probably just need to see, one go through the hoop. They need to get a turnover or two this game just to get that confidence and get the offense back on the field. Because personally, I'm nervous about both sides. I think if the Steelers can hold Lamar and Derrick Henry specifically to the short gains on first and second down, then they could easily have the same type of mentality that Henry was saying earlier, where if the Steelers offense doesn't really start perfect, start really like they're catching fire, then I feel honestly that kind of reminded me of us. Maybe that's the entire NFL as well, but that's how I see it.
I was going to say real quick on that point. I actually push back slightly on that, where we'll see the Ravens have a 2nd and 20 this year, and Lamar just hits Aguilar over the middle for 35. So, I do think the Ravens offense has been a little inevitable in that part, where I think the defense is just like, okay, like what are we even supposed to do? But that's all I wanted to add for that. Go ahead, Dawson.
I will say it'll be very scary in this matchup if the Ravens defense is kind of forced to have to make some plays in the end to hopefully win this game for us. It would be very scary if the offense is kind of, I don't want to say lifeless, but lifeless compared to what they've been doing to teams. Because I don't think we go into this game and put up 40 points on Pittsburgh. It's just not going to happen. I honestly don't think we put up even 30 against Pittsburgh. I'm going to be honest, and it's just the way these games go. So it would be kind of scary if the Ravens offense is kind of out of sorts this game per usual, like they are against Pittsburgh, and it would be pretty scary to think about this defense having to make a stop to probably put this game away. To be honest with you,
I would. Zach, you were mentioning like the yards after catch for Steelers receivers, and I wouldn't undersell Pickens. He's had a few long ones. He had one against the Bengals with Mason Rudolph at quarterback last year, where I think it was like an 80-yard touchdown, took a slant to the house. He had one against the Browns last year too, on like a post. His yards after, I mean, it's really, again, he doesn't get those over the middle chances. Sort of with the quarterbacks we've had with Kenny Pickett, Mitch Trubisky, Russell Wilson to a lesser extent. And then we do have Calvin Austin. He got injured at the end of last game, but I think he's on track to play this week. And he's someone that does have that burner speed. But again, it does come down to being able to get the ball over the middle. When we played the Chargers earlier in the season with Justin Fields at quarterback, he had a 50-yard touchdown where it was like a 15 yards over the middle, then was able to turn on the burners and score. I don't know if that's necessarily in the playbook with Russell Wilson out there, but I think the Steelers have a little bit there. And maybe with Mike Williams on the outside, that frees up Pickens to work the middle of the field a little bit more.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that was good discussion on both sides of the ball. Now we'll sort of get into the X factors and the keys to the game and all that. So, Henry, we'll keep it in your court for this one. If the Steelers want to win this game, or if the Steelers are going to win this game, whether it's on something on the offensive side of the ball, something on the defensive side of the ball, or even a coaching thing, what do you think are one thing or multiple things that they need to do?
I mean, it's pretty basic, but like the turnover margin, and all of these Steelers Ravens games with Lamar, it's been like, well, you force this many turnovers, and then they're still like a drive away from winning the game at the end of the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
Like, you got a pick six. He fumbled in the red zone. He threw another interception, but then they still have one drive at the end to win. But that's something the Steelers need to do. They weren't able to force a turnover against the Commanders last week. They had a fumble on a punt, and they also ran a fake punt on 4th and 15 from their 15. That it worked, but they dropped the ball. But that turnover margin is going to be huge, and with an offense as potent as the Ravens, it's not going to be. You really have to step up there. It's not going to be enough to, I would say, even just hold them to field goals, which would be great. But they're going to be coming with touchdowns. They're going to be moving the ball pretty easily. You need those turnovers to set yourself up with better field position, to steal possessions, to keep Lamar off the field. And it's those splash plays. I'm looking at Minka to step up there. We talk about X factors. I'm really looking at Patrick Queen to see what he can do. Is he going to be on skates, emotions getting the best of him, or is he going to be continuing this trend of really getting his game together and being able to stop Lamar, use what he learned in practice for all those years, and finally get a chance to tackle him, as he was saying. So I'm really looking at that, and I feel like the past bodes well for that, like the turnover margin there. Obviously, that comes with the Steelers not turning the ball over, but they've been pretty good about that this year, and they end up in a lot of close games where it's like, man, it doesn't seem like the Steelers are doing that well. How are they still in this game? It's because they're not turning the ball over, and your defense is good enough to get some stops. That's what I'm looking for.
Dawson, for you, what would you say the Ravens need to do to come away with this one?
The Ravens need to play Baltimore Raven football. I posted earlier on Instagram kind of covering this because I thought about it earlier and I'm like, I think this is post-worthy. I think the Ravens tend to, obviously we've seen this a lot in the past, especially in the playoffs, and it's infuriating, get away from their brand of football in a weird aspect of trying to outsmart these teams. Mike Tomlin is the last guy you'd ever be able to outsmart in the NFL, and I would hope that we know this. It'd be pretty crazy if we don't. And we ourselves have a very long tenured veteran head coach. I think they're the two longest tenured head coaches, respectively, which I'm getting off track either way. The Ravens tend to get away from their brand of football in a lot of things. And I posted earlier that they just need to play their brand of football to set themselves up for this game. Don't try to get tricky up early. Don't try to do something different than what has got you to this point. Just go out there and play Baltimore Raven football and adjust accordingly. I think if you look at the box score or whatever you want to call it, stat sheet, headlines, anything, Pittsburgh's defense is really good against the run. They're a really good defense overall. And they got a lot. I would say Henry probably doesn't agree with this because he was talking about them not too long ago, but their pass defense, I think, is a little bit better than people give them credit for. I'm not saying it's great by any margin, but I do think they're a top half pass defense, but their run defense is really good. And I think that the Ravens need to just go in this game and play their brand of football and not try to be tricky and come out the gate and throw in it 100 times. Despite how good they are against the run, I think they need to try doing exactly what they've done to this point and run, try to get the offense opened up, try to get both sides of the ball cooking. If Derrick Henry gets going in this game, it will allow Lamar and company to do exactly what they've done all season and open up the pass attack. I don't want this to be a game where the Ravens come in early on, try to throw the ball, way more than they run it a few times, it doesn't go anywhere, and they just abandon the run, until the late third quarter, fourth quarter when they're behind, and then running does you no good. So I want this to be a game where they come out 50-50, evenly running and passing, and just try to really force this offense to get going early. I don't want to see this Ravens offense come out, go 3 and out with, 3 runs or 3 and out with 3 passes. Like I want this to be an evenly distributed drive, offensive game plan, and I think it will. Obviously, we have a lot of faith and trust in Todd Monken. He's done amazing things for us in Baltimore through 2 seasons, and I don't think it will be, but I could see this game being one of those games where the Ravens try to outsmart themselves, really, and they just outplay themselves and just play a different brand of football, which causes you to lose the game. So, like I said, I don't think that will happen. I really don't want it to happen, but I think there is a possibility that if there's any game, it would probably be this one because, you know, it's just a divisional game. Weird stuff always happens, but I think if the Ravens play their brand of football that they've been playing the whole season, despite a couple of games that we've seen, I think they are in as good a position as anyone to win this game.
You talk about the long tenured head coaches and not outsmarting each other. It is funny. They are the two worst coaches in the leagues at challenges. Terrible. Zero
Yeah.
IQ on the challenges.
Yeah.
It's every game. I'm watching these with Brad. Brad's watching these with me. Where it's like, I mean, I guess it's not in Baltimore, so Harbaugh's not going to be swayed by the crowd yelling at the video board. But it's like, very, very low chances either of these teams win their challenges, and that's just funny with how respected these coaches are and how good they are.
Yeah. Dawson, you brought it up, I think it was Dawson, about trying to outsmart Tomlin and the Ravens trying to outsmart Tomlin. And this really goes into the Steelers being 7-1 in the last 8 games since 2020 against the Ravens. After the Ravens' first loss to the Steelers last year, 17-10 on October 8th, Mike Tomlin – oh, no. Okay, yeah. So years ago, Mike Tomlin said that the Ravens don't play a full 4 quarters. After that game last year, he said, when it's a dying moment, they will try to burn the house down. He said that about the Ravens last year, and it was a true statement. We see the Ravens blow a lot of leads, and that was a game where they dropped 10 passes, and I do feel like it's something about – in the Lamar Jackson era, and I'm not saying Lamar, I'm just using that time span, the Ravens and the Chiefs, the Steelers and the Chiefs, when the Ravens play both of those teams, something is just not right. And I think we've seen that for a while now, and the Ravens, whether it's hardball challenging, something that's not a challenge, and you lose a timeout in the fourth quarter, or it's going for 2. Maybe they had the right play drawn up, but they don't get it and don't even get to go into overtime. Just those sorts of things, uncharacteristic turnovers. What Tomlin said is true is the Ravens do find a way to lose games, and they rarely, you could count it on one hand how many times they just lost because they weren't the better team in the Lamar era. There might not even be more than 1 or 2 times. They beat themselves every single time they lose. That's how talented they are, and it'll just basically what I'm saying is Ravens need to not have stupid turnovers and basically they just need to hold themselves together in the fourth quarter, and I think they would come away with this one.
Yeah, what for my kind of circled reason for what the Ravens need to do to win, I think, Dawson, what you were saying about kind of pounding the rock and starting to get that going. I'm big on Derek having a good game. I looked up his stats. The last 3 games, the only 3 games that he's played Pittsburgh, he had 30 yards, 75 yards, and 75 yards. It's not that good, but it's pretty good. It's still Derek Henry. It's still great running back. It's just not as dominant as you'd see play all year for the Ravens. And I think what they need to do is really let Lamar be a part of the running game plan this time. As the last few weeks, we've seen him scramble and get some kind of yards in that way, but there hasn't really been some big break off for design runs for Lamar to really take over the game. Sure, the Steelers' defensive line and their linebackers right now, that's not necessarily the best team to do that for. But if you want to get Derrick Henry going, then that means Lamar's going to have to be a part of it, because Derek would be too easy to game plan. You stack the box and try and stop him. And I think we want to play our brand of football right now, which would be kind of air it out and let our guys create separation and make big plays. But we also want to give the rock to Derrick Henry and let him play, and because that would be much easier. So I lean on Henry having a big game. If he doesn't, I think it immediately goes back to the recipe that's been working, which is getting the ball aired out, letting the receivers make plays, letting Lamar really pass the rock like he has been and as accurate as he's been, and then eventually letting Derek take over the game.
Yeah, I think you talk about the lack of rushing yards and having TJ Watt, Cam Hayward, in the past, Alex Highsmith is huge for that because, some teams decide they want to run at TJ Watt and try to neutralize that. Well, A, you're running at TJ Watt. B, you got Cam Hayward. And also, are you going to be letting Alex Highsmith be flying around the side? Now, with Highsmith out, I think you have an interesting proposition of sort of in the run game untested with Nick Herbig, who's going to be stepping up there. He's a great pass rusher, but nowhere near as stout as Alex Highsmith is in the run game, and certainly doesn't have the reps, the feel against a quarterback like Lamar Jackson, but Lamar Jackson himself that Alex Highsmith does. So I think there's a chance at some sort of exploitation there. To go back to what you were saying, Brad, about Tomlin coaching and all of that, what's interesting with the Steelers is one of Tomlin's great traits is halftime adjustments. It's something that I think goes under the radar, and a lot of Steelers fans maybe feel like Tomlin isn't as heavy with the X's and O's, which who really knows? I think there's a lot of microaggressions potentially with being labeled as a player's coach and being on the defensive side of the ball and whatever. But halftime adjustments is something players talk about a lot. TJ Watt will come out of some games oh yeah, Tomlin gave us this to do at halftime, came in and it played out well. How do we see that playing out this year so far? The Steelers just last week gave up their first third quarter points. They gave up 10 points in the third quarter to Washington, but then didn't give up any points over the last 20 minutes of the game. They tend to bring a lot more pressure. Their blitz rate increases in the second half so far this year. So looking at things like that where you talk about the Ravens will try and burn the house down. Well, the Steelers they're ramping up the pressure. They're giving you different looks that you didn't see in the first half, and that's very intentional. And that's part of the reason why the Steelers are so successful in one-score games.
Yeah, that's good insight there, and definitely Harbaugh and Tomlin are two guys that are known for halftime adjustments.
It's funny because real quick, it's like you have the coach who wins the most games when you think they're not expected to in Mike Tomlin.
Mhm.
And then you have the coach who I feel like loses the most games when they're not expected to in John
Yeah.
Harbaugh. It's like a coach that finds ways to win versus a coach who finds ways to lose. And unfortunately for us, that we're on the bad end of that. But it'll be interesting to see because that's quite literally a really good. That's truthful. I mean, what I just said, that's very truthful.
Yeah. Okay. Score predictions. Dawson, do you want to start?
I don't want to, but I guess I'll get it done.
Okay.
I don't think all season I predicted a loss for the Ravens. I don't think it's happened to this point. I have a bad feeling about this game, and I hate to say this more than anyone, and I don't want to get hate for this. I do think the Ravens drop this game. If there's any game that I confidently think we could lose, I think it is this one. There's a weird voodoo magic that happens when the Ravens go to Pittsburgh, and I don't think you can blame me. We have a 1-7 record against them in the last 8 games. I mean, you guys can't blame me for this. Until I see something different, I just think the Ravens have a curse when they go to Pittsburgh, when they play Pittsburgh in general. I think the Ravens could very well drop this game. It's going to be a weird game, I'm telling you. I hope I'm wrong. I really hope you guys are all laughing in my face come, next week. But I think this is going to be a game where weird stuff happens and turnovers happen. Ravens go 3-0 at times when they shouldn't. Just weird stuff's going to happen. I think the Ravens drop this game anywhere 26-22. I think it's going to be another close game. Comes down to the last minute. And I think that, unfortunately, if this comes down to a kicking battle right now, a kicker's duel, I think Pittsburgh has a slight edge over us, so that sucks. But I just until I see differently, I think the Ravens the pass against Pittsburgh means something, and it's very scary to think about. But I think this is a game the Ravens could lose, and if I'm a betting man this week, unfortunately, I think I'm putting my money on Pittsburgh.
Wow.
Wow.
I honestly don't mind the spread, Dawson. I'm somewhat of a betting man, but yeah, I would kind of agree with you there. My score prediction, I had down a little less points for Pittsburgh at first. I'm gonna go 26-24 Ravens. Yeah, just kind of convinced myself that the defense wouldn't play that good, so kind of gave myself a little reality check. But yeah, Flock, I'm getting us right here. I think the Ravens take this one. I think we're gonna have a big game from Mr. Zay Flowers. I think someone like Bateman could be involved a little bit. It's about that separation, like Henry was saying too. That kind of boosts my confidence. Their corners kind of maybe having an issue with that type of thing. Getting Likely back is a big deal. We're gonna have a lot of guys that we can throw at them to hopefully let Lamar just get it to them and let them do, what they do. Besides just the big plays that Lamar creates, we're going to need some of those, especially with TJ Watt. I mean, I think they can steal this one. This would be a big deal because it's a 1-point game or 1-score game. I mean, it could come down to the very end. That's also like a wonky score, 26-14-24. So that means a lot of kicking, maybe.
Maybe a safety.
Right, something crazy. I just expect a weird game, and I expect them somehow edging out with a win.
All right, Henry, you're up next.
Yeah, I think you can probably tell from Jeepers, some of my comments today about the Steelers that I am not the most confident Steelers fan. And I think the Ravens are going to win this one. I'm honestly predicting that it'll be a 2-score game, 31-21 Ravens. I think when you're looking at the spread, the Ravens being 3-point favorites on the road in this game means something. Clearly Vegas, if it was going to be a draw and the Steelers are at home, the Steelers would be favored by 2.5 or whatever. But instead it's complete opposite with the Ravens. I think that means something. I can see it being a close game the whole time where the Ravens are kicking a field goal at the end to make it a 2-score game and the Steelers aren't able to get it done, or maybe the Ravens are winning by more and the Steelers are trying to claw back into it at the end and can't get it done. The Ravens offense is so potent, so talented. They have so many weapons. I've been saying they're due. I think this could be the game that Lamar finally gets the monkey off his back. If they can limit the turnovers, and then you don't know with Russ. I mean, he hasn't been in this rivalry before. Part of it's only his 4th game starting for the Steelers. I'm just not 100% confident in that, and we haven't seen the train fall off the tracks yet so far. Though the Steelers were down 10 in the second half last week. I think the Ravens I think it's set up for them. I think the talent on offense is undeniable, but I would love to be proven wrong.
Yeah, it's definitely a little bit surprising. Zach, it's really funny. I feel like yours and mine's score predictions are always just the same.
Pretty
And
close. Did you hear Dawson's? Dawson's was literally also just
yeah,
ours. I can
just
see what Brad
reversed.
picked. But yeah, it's
And
it's literally all right there.
I wrote down in our preview before this, I had Ravens 26, Steelers 23. I just feel like if it wasn't the Steelers and I was just looking at their roster and the games they had played this year and they were just a blank uniform, I think I'd predict the Ravens to win by 10, 13. But obviously divisional games play a role in this, and Mike Tomlin and all that. I do think the Ravens are obviously the much more talented team. I think we talked about it last night. We went down a list ranking offensive personnel. We thought the Ravens were 3rd or 4th in the NFL. I don't know. I think it will be close. I think there will be multiple field goals kicked. I think there'll be a lot of field goals kicked. I think both defenses will sort of be holding up in the red zone, but I do think the Ravens come away with this one. There is kind of that factor of being due or whatever. And I think Lamar's going to have a good game. I think the defense will struggle with Pickens a lot. I think Pickens is going to have a big game, probably a couple deep catches outside the numbers, maybe a touchdown or two. Same with Mike Williams. We'll see. But I do think the Ravens get it done. I think this is just a game where, and you could say this for almost every NFL game, where like the better quarterback usually wins the game. And I think I'd definitely take Lamar over Russ in like a 2-minute drill situation. And if it is close at the end, I think the Ravens will be able to pull this one out. So, yeah. Anyone have any final thoughts?
Man, Deshaun Elliott talking a lot on Marlon's podcast, dude.
Yeah.
My goodness, about former teams and everything. I felt like we kind of just brushed over that, but
I mean,
that
could you
was
imagine
ridiculous.
Ray Lewis and or Troy Polamalu and Ed Reed on a podcast before a game?
No, I cannot.
No way.
It's interesting how that shapes out, and they didn't have that available to them.
Yeah.
I feel like I don't take too much stock in that, like considering Marlon's having him on the podcast, like he's hosting it, like of the game. I think that they're both guilty parties. I wouldn't be like, oh, like Deshaun Elliott's talking all this trash. It's like, well, you having him on your podcast, like you're setting him up for this. And I don't think too much of what he said is like super out there.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks everyone for being here tonight. 2 episodes in a row. 2 days in a row with an episode. We'll be back on Sunday with a post-game reaction to hopefully a Ravens win in this one. Wish Henry and I luck watching this one together. So yeah, thanks everyone. Like the video, subscribe, check out our Q&A last night if you want to watch that. Check us out on Spotify if you'd rather listen over there as well. And yeah, we'll see you guys later. Peace.